Some betrayals don't begin with shouting, tears, or broken plates. Sometimes they begin with a quiet kiss, in a crowded room, on a day meant to celebrate love. If you're new to this channel, just subscribe now, and say it in the comment section. And sometimes, the person watching that kiss is the one who trusted the two people involved the most. Kayoma Adeyemi had always loved Mother's Day. For her, it wasn't about flowers or expensive gifts. It was about the small moments, her children running into her room early in the morning, the messy breakfast they tried to prepare, the handmade cards covered in crayons and glitter. This year was supposed to be no different. That Sunday morning in Lagos began peacefully. Sunlight filtered through the curtains of their spacious home in Lekki, warming the polished wooden floor. The smell of pancakes drifted from the kitchen, followed by the loud whispering of two children who clearly believed they were being quiet. "Don't burn it," 7-year-old Dara whispered loudly. "I'm not burning it," her older brother Kelechi argued. "Daddy said low heat." Kayoma smiled from the bedroom doorway as she watched them. Kelechi stood on a stool flipping pancakes with intense concentration, while Dara carefully arranged strawberries on a plate as if she were decorating a royal banquet. Tunde stood behind them, tall and relaxed, wearing a simple white t-shirt and sweatpants. He guided Kelechi's hand on the pan. "Easy," he said softly. "Cooking is patience." Kayoma's chest warmed. This was the life she loved. 10 years of marriage had given her stability, laughter, and 2 children who filled their house with energy. Tunde wasn't perfect, but he had always been a good husband. Responsible. Calm. Reliable. And most importantly, he adored their children. Suddenly Dara spotted her. "Mummy," she shouted. Both children ran toward her. "Happy Mother's Day," they yelled together. Kayoma laughed as they wrapped their arms around her waist. Tunde walked toward them holding a plate stacked with pancakes. "Well," he said with a proud smile, "your breakfast is ready, madam." Kayoma raised an eyebrow playfully. "Oh really? And who cooked this?" "Tunde Adeyemi and his very professional assistants," he said proudly. They all sat at the dining table. The kids talked non-stop about school stories and cartoons while Kayoma listened, enjoying the chaos. Halfway through breakfast, Tunde checked his phone. Just for a moment. But Kayoma noticed. His expression changed slightly, just a quick flicker of tension before he locked the screen. "You okay?" she asked casually. "Yes," he said quickly. "Work message." Kayoma nodded. Tunde managed several real estate projects across Lagos. Weekend messages weren't unusual. Still, something about that brief look stayed in her mind. But she pushed it away. Today was supposed to be joyful. After breakfast, the kids handed her their handmade cards. Dara's card had hearts drawn everywhere. Kelechi's had a slightly crooked message written in blue marker. "Best MOM ever." Kayoma kissed both of them. "This is the best gift," she said sincerely. But the biggest surprise of the day came later that afternoon. Her phone rang while she was folding laundry. The name on the screen made her smile. "Amaka." Kayoma answered immediately. "Madam Celebrity Mother," Amaka said dramatically. "How are you celebrating today?" Kayoma laughed. "I already celebrated with pancakes made by junior chefs." "That's not enough," Amaka replied firmly. "You deserve something better." "Amaka? I've already made reservations." Kayoma paused. "What?" "A beautiful restaurant in Victoria Island. Elegant. Romantic. Perfect for Mother's Day." Kayoma hesitated. Tunde didn't mention anything. "Exactly," Amaka said. "Which means you should surprise him." Kayoma leaned against the wall. "A surprise dinner?" "Yes. Go there early. When he arrives, you'll be sitting there looking beautiful." Kayoma thought about it. It actually sounded fun. She rarely did spontaneous things. Okay, she finally agreed. Good, Amaka said happily. Table is reserved for 7 o'clock. By evening, Lagos was glowing with city lights. Traffic moved slowly along the roads as Kyoma drove toward Victoria Island. She had taken extra time getting ready. A deep emerald dress that fit perfectly. Soft makeup. Gold earrings Tunde had bought for her on their anniversary 2 years ago. When she looked in the mirror earlier, she had smiled. Not because she was trying to impress anyone, but because after years of marriage and motherhood, it felt nice to feel beautiful again. The restaurant Amaka chose was stunning. Soft lighting. Live piano music. Elegant decor. Kyoma stepped inside, slightly nervous. A hostess approached her. Good evening, Ma. Good evening. I believe a reservation was made under Amaka. The hostess checked the tablet. Yes, Ma. Right this way. Kyoma followed her through the restaurant. Her heart beat faster with excitement. She imagined Tunde walking in and seeing her sitting there. His surprised smile. Maybe they would laugh about the unexpected date. Maybe they would remember how things felt when they first started dating. But as they moved deeper into the restaurant, something made Kyoma slow down. Her eyes moved across the room. Then she saw him. Tunde. He was already there, sitting at a table near the center of the restaurant. Kyoma's steps stopped completely. But it wasn't the fact that he was early that froze her. It was the woman sitting across from him. They were leaning toward each other, talking quietly. Too close. Kyoma's heart began to pound. Her first thought was simple confusion. Maybe it was a colleague. Maybe they were discussing work. But then something happened that made the air leave her lungs. Tunde smiled softly. The same gentle smile he used when comforting the kids. Then he reached across the table and took the woman's hand. Kyoma felt the ground shift under her feet. The hostess noticed she had stopped walking. Ma, she asked politely. Kyoma didn't answer. Her entire focus was locked on the table across the room. Tunde leaned forward. Slowly. Carefully. And then? He kissed the woman. Not a quick friendly kiss. Not a greeting. A real kiss. The kind that belonged to lovers. The restaurant noise faded into the background. Kyoma stood frozen near the entrance as if someone had pressed pause on her life. Her chest tightened. Her mind refused to process what her eyes were seeing. This couldn't be real. Not Tunde. Not her husband. Not today. But the worst part wasn't the kiss. It was when the woman leaned back slightly and Kyoma finally saw her face clearly. The woman laughed softly at something Tunde whispered. And in that moment, recognition hit Kyoma like a lightning strike. Her stomach dropped. Because the woman sitting with her husband was someone she knew very well. Someone she trusted. Someone who had been inside her home many times. Kimi Balogun. For a few seconds, Kyoma could not breathe. The restaurant around her continued moving as if nothing had happened. Waiters walked between tables carrying trays of wine glasses, the pianist played a slow romantic melody, couples laughed softly over candlelight dinners. But for Kyoma, everything felt distant and unreal. Her entire world had narrowed to one small table across the room. And the two people sitting there. Tunde and Kimi Balogun. Kyoma's fingers tightened around her purse as memories began flashing through her mind like fragments of a broken mirror. Kimi standing in Kyoma's living room during Dara's 6th birthday party, laughing loudly with the other guests. Kimi hugging Kyoma warmly during Christmas dinner 2 years ago. Kimi bringing homemade stew one evening when Kyoma had been sick. She wasn't just an acquaintance. Kimi was a friend. A trusted one. Someone Kyoma had welcomed into her home countless times. Her heart pounded painfully as she stared at them. Maybe she had misunderstood the kiss. Maybe it was some kind of greeting. But the way they were sitting destroyed that fragile hope. Their chairs were close together. Too close. Tunde's body leaned toward Kimi in a way Kyoma knew very well. It was the same way he leaned toward her when they had quiet moments together at night. Kyoma's stomach twisted. The hostess beside her spoke again. "Ma, your table is this way." Kyoma forced herself to move. "Actually, give me a moment," she said quietly. The hostess nodded politely and walked away. Kyoma stepped slightly behind a decorative pillar near the entrance of the restaurant. From there, she could still see their table clearly. But they could not easily see her. Her heart was beating so loudly she wondered if anyone around her could hear it. Kimi was talking now. Her long braids fell over her shoulder as she leaned closer to Tunde. Kyoma could not hear their words from where she stood, but she could see the intensity of the conversation. Kimi reached for Tunde's hand again. Kyoma's chest tightened painfully. Her mind started racing through questions. How long? How long had this been happening? Weeks? Months? Years? Had it started when Kimi began visiting their house more frequently last year? Had it started earlier? Kyoma suddenly remembered something that now made her stomach churn. 6 months ago, during a family barbecue, she had left the backyard briefly to answer a phone call. When she returned, she had found Tunde and Kimi standing near the kitchen door talking quietly. They had quickly stepped apart when they saw her. At the time, Kyoma had thought nothing of it. Now the memory felt different. Suspicious. Her breathing became shallow. At the table, Tunde ran a hand over his face. He looked tense. That detail confused Kyoma. If he was having an affair, why did he look so stressed? Kimi said something that made him shake his head slowly. Then she leaned closer again, speaking more urgently. Kyoma wished she could hear them. Her entire body felt like it was vibrating with anger and heartbreak. She imagined walking across the restaurant and slapping both of them. She imagined shouting loud enough for the entire room to hear. But something inside her held her back. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the need to understand before acting. Kyoma pressed herself closer to the pillar and continued watching. A waiter approached their table. "Good evening, sir. Would you like to order now?" Tunde glanced at the menu briefly but shook his head. "Give us a few minutes." The waiter nodded and walked away. Kimi sighed and rested her elbow on the table. She looked around the restaurant quickly. Her eyes moved nervously from table to table. Kyoma frowned. Why did she look like that? If they were secretly meeting for a romantic dinner, why did Kimi look afraid of being seen? Kimi leaned closer and said something again. This time, Kyoma caught a few words when Kimi's voice rose slightly. "Too risky." Tunde rubbed his temples. "I know." Kimi lowered her voice again. Kyoma felt frustration building. She needed to hear them. She carefully moved away from the pillar and walked slowly along the wall toward another column closer to their table. Her steps were quiet. The soft music and conversation around the restaurant covered the small sound of her heels. When she reached the second pillar, their voices became clearer. Not perfectly clear, but enough. "I told you we shouldn't have done it here," Kimi whispered. Tunde leaned forward. "It's the only place we could talk without suspicion." Kyoma's heart pounded. "Without suspicion?" Kimi glanced around again. "You don't understand how dangerous this is," she said. Tunde looked at her seriously. "I understand perfectly." Kimi shook her head. "No, you don't. If she finds out tonight." She stopped suddenly. Kayoma's entire body stiffened. She? They were talking about her. Tunde exhaled slowly. I don't want to hurt Kayoma. Hearing her name from his mouth in that moment felt like a knife sliding into her chest. Kayoma gripped the edge of the pillar. Tunde continued quietly. She doesn't deserve this. Kimi's expression softened for a moment. I know. Kayoma's eyes filled with tears. So they knew. They knew what they were doing was wrong. Yet they were still here. Still holding hands. Still kissing. The humiliation burned inside her. Across the room, a couple laughed loudly at another table, completely unaware of the storm unfolding just a few feet away. Kimi suddenly reached across the table again and squeezed Tunde's hand. We have to finish this before she arrives. Kayoma froze. Before she arrives? Her confusion deepened. What did that mean? Tunde looked toward the restaurant entrance briefly. His eye scanned the room. Kayoma quickly leaned back behind the pillar so he wouldn't see her. When she peeked again, he was looking back at Kimi. She'll be here soon, he said. Kayoma's mind spun. Was he expecting her? Did he know about the reservation? Or was this simply a coincidence? Kimi leaned closer. We can't let her find out like this, she whispered. Tunde nodded slowly. I know. Kayoma's chest tightened again. Find out what? What exactly were they hiding? Kimi looked down at the table for a moment. Then she whispered something that made Kayoma's confusion deepen even more. This whole thing started years ago, she said softly. Tunde's jaw tightened. We agreed never to talk about that night again. Kimi shook her head. We didn't have a choice back then. Kayoma's heart began racing faster. Years ago? What were they talking about? Tunde leaned back in his chair, clearly uncomfortable. It's done, he said quietly. There's nothing we can change now. Kimi stared at him. You really believe that? Silence hung between them. Kayoma felt like she was listening to a puzzle where half the pieces were missing. Nothing they were saying made complete sense. But one thing was clear. Something big was being hidden from her. Something that had started long before this dinner. Kimi suddenly lowered her voice even further. There's something else you need to know. Tunde frowned. What? Kimi hesitated. Then she whispered a sentence that made Kayoma's heart skip. She must never find out about this. Kayoma felt a surge of anger rise inside her. Enough. She had heard enough secrets. Enough whispers. Enough lies. Her husband was sitting with another woman, one she trusted, and they were talking about things that clearly involved her. Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped away from the pillar. Her heart pounded violently in her chest. Across the restaurant, Tunde and Kimi were still deep in conversation, completely unaware of what was about to happen. Kayoma straightened her shoulders. Her eyes hardened. Then she began walking directly toward their table. One step at a time. Each step steady. Each step filled with pain, anger, and determination. By the time she reached their table, both of them looked up. And the moment their eyes met hers, everything changed. For a moment, none of them spoke. The soft piano music in the restaurant continued playing, but the table where Kayoma stood felt frozen in time. Tunde's face drained of color so quickly it was almost frightening. Kayoma. The word came out as a whisper. Kimi's hand instantly pulled away from the table as if it had touched fire. Her eyes widened in shock, and for the first time since Kayoma arrived, the confident woman looked completely unprepared. Kayoma stood straight, her purse hanging from one shoulder, her expression calm in a way that surprised even herself. Inside, her heart was beating violently. But outside, she refused to look weak. She slowly pulled out the empty chair beside their table and sat down. The movement forced both Tunde and Kimi to shift awkwardly. "Good evening," Kyoma said quietly. No one responded. A waiter who had been approaching with water glasses noticed the tension and immediately turned away. Tunde swallowed hard. You're here." Kyoma looked at him directly. "Yes. I'm here." Her eyes briefly moved to Kimi. The woman couldn't hold her gaze for more than a second before looking down. That small reaction confirmed something painful inside Kyoma. Guilt. Heavy, obvious guilt. Kyoma folded her hands neatly on the table. "Happy Mother's Day to me," she said softly. The sentence carried no shouting. No anger. Just quiet disappointment. Tunde rubbed his face slowly. "Kyoma, I can explain." Kyoma let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh. That's usually what men say when their wives catch them with another woman. Kimi's lips trembled slightly. "Kyoma, please." "Don't," Kyoma interrupted calmly, raising one hand. Kimi stopped talking immediately. For a few seconds, Kyoma simply looked at both of them. The man she had shared 10 years of marriage with. And the woman she had trusted inside her home. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on her chest. But the strangest thing was that she didn't feel the explosive rage she had imagined earlier. Instead, she felt something colder. A quiet, painful clarity. Kyoma turned to Tunde. "How long?" The question hung between them. Tunde stared at the table. "Kyoma." "How long?" she repeated. Her voice was still calm. But firmer. Tunde sighed deeply. "It's not what you think." Kyoma shook her head slowly. "You kissed her." Neither of them denied it. "You held her hand." Still silence. Kyoma leaned back slightly in her chair. "I saw everything." Tunde's shoulders sagged. Kimi wiped her eyes quickly. Kyoma looked at both of them again. "So I'll ask one more time." She looked directly at her husband. "How long has this been going on?" The entire restaurant seemed louder now. People talking. Glasses clinking. But at their table, the silence felt heavy. Tunde looked up at Kyoma. His eyes were filled with something she didn't expect. Not guilt. Not shame. Fear. Not fear of being caught. But something deeper. More complicated. Tunde finally spoke. "Kyoma, nothing is going on." Kyoma stared at him. For a moment she thought she had misheard. "Nothing," she repeated. Kimi suddenly started crying quietly. Kyoma's eyebrows pulled together in confusion. What was happening? If they were having an affair, why did Kimi look like she was about to collapse? Tunde leaned forward. "I know what you saw," he said softly. "And I know how it looks." "It looks exactly like what it is," Kyoma replied. Tunde shook his head slowly. "No." Kyoma's patience began to crack slightly. "You kissed her?" "Yes." The answer came without hesitation. "But that kiss," he continued, "was not what you think it was." Kyoma felt frustration rise. "Then what was it?" Tunde glanced briefly at Kimi before looking back at Kyoma. "We were trying to solve a problem." Kyoma stared at him. "A problem," she repeated slowly. "Yes." "And the solution involved kissing her in a restaurant." Kimi suddenly spoke through tears. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." Kyoma turned toward her sharply. "Oh really?" Kimi wiped her face with a napkin. "We didn't expect you to be here." Kyoma let out a bitter laugh. "That's the only thing you're sorry about." "No," Kimi said quickly. "That's not what I meant." Tunde raised his hand gently. Let me explain. Kayoma crossed her arms. Please do. Tunde leaned back in his chair, as if preparing himself for something difficult. This situation started a long time ago. Kayoma's eyes narrowed. How long? Tunde hesitated. About 8 years. Kayoma felt like the air had been punched from her lungs. 8 years. 8 years? That meant their entire marriage. Her voice became very quiet. 8 years? Tunde nodded slowly. Kimi looked completely miserable now. Kayoma's mind raced. 8 years. Had their entire marriage been built on a lie? She suddenly remembered what Kimi had whispered earlier. This whole thing started years ago. Kayoma leaned forward again. What exactly started 8 years ago? Tunde looked at Kimi again. Kimi shook her head slightly as if warning him. But Tunde ignored it. He turned back to Kayoma. There's something about our family you don't know. Kayoma's heart began beating faster again. What does that mean? Tunde spoke carefully. Before you and I got married, something happened. Kayoma's chest tightened. What? Kimi suddenly grabbed Tunde's arm. Tunde, maybe this isn't the place. But Tunde gently removed her hand. No. It has to be now. Kayoma's confusion grew stronger. Nothing about this situation made sense. Tunde leaned closer to Kayoma. You deserve to know the truth. Kayoma's voice was barely above a whisper. What truth? Tunde exhaled slowly. It involves Kimi. Kayoma turned sharply toward the crying woman. Kimi couldn't look at her. Kayoma felt the tension growing heavier. Her mind tried to guess what he was about to say. An affair. A child. A financial secret. But when Tunde finally spoke, the sentence that came out was something Kayoma never expected. 8 years ago, he said quietly, Kimi saved your life. Kayoma blinked. What? Kimi finally looked up at her, tears running down her cheeks. It's true. Kayoma stared between them. None of this made sense. My life, she repeated. Tunde nodded slowly. Yes. Kayoma leaned back, stunned. I don't understand. Tunde sighed. Because we never told you. The weight of those words settled heavily between them. Kayoma's mind spun. Never told her what? And why would something like that lead to secret meetings and kisses 8 years later? Her voice trembled slightly. What exactly are you talking about? Tunde looked directly into her eyes. And in that moment, Kayoma realized the truth he was about to reveal was something far bigger than an affair. Something that had been hidden from her for nearly a decade. Something that would completely change the way she understood her own life. Kayoma stared at Tunde as if she were seeing him for the first time. Kimi saved my life, she repeated slowly. The words sounded strange even as she said them. Across the table, Kimi wiped her face again, still unable to fully meet Kayoma's eyes. Tunde nodded quietly. Yes. Kayoma leaned back in her chair, trying to make sense of the statement. I would remember if someone saved my life, she said. Tunde shook his head gently. No. You wouldn't. Kayoma's confusion deepened. What does that even mean? For a moment, none of them spoke. The restaurant around them continued its normal rhythm, waiters moving, glasses clinking, laughter floating through the air, but their table felt like a small island of tension. Finally, Tunde spoke again. Do you remember the accident? Kayoma frowned. What accident? The one that happened a few months before our wedding. Her mind searched through old memories. Then something faint surfaced. A blurry recollection. Hospital lights. Her mother sitting beside a hospital bed. A sharp headache that had lasted for weeks. I remember being sick, Kyoma said slowly. The doctors said it was severe anemia. They said my body collapsed from stress. Tunde looked down briefly before meeting her eyes again. That's what they told you. Kyoma's stomach tightened. What are you saying? Tunde glanced at Kimi. Kimi nodded slightly, giving him silent permission. Tunde leaned forward. That night, 8 years ago, you didn't collapse from anemia. Kyoma felt a cold sensation crawl up her spine. Then what happened? Tunde hesitated. You were poisoned. The word landed heavily. Kyoma blinked several times. Poisoned? Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Yes. The world around her suddenly felt unreal. Poisoned by who? Tunde exhaled slowly. We never found out. Kyoma shook her head. That makes no sense. The doctors never said anything like that. They couldn't, Tunde replied quietly. Because we stopped them from investigating further. Kyoma stared at him. You stopped them? Kimi finally spoke, her voice trembling. Because the person who saved you begged us not to. Kyoma's eyes moved to her. You mean you? Kimi nodded. Yes. Kyoma leaned forward again, completely lost. Start from the beginning, she said firmly. Tunde nodded. That night, you collapsed at home. You remember that part? Kyoma nodded slowly. I remember feeling dizzy. Everything spinning. Then nothing. You lost consciousness before the ambulance arrived, Tunde said. The doctor said your blood pressure had dropped dangerously low. Kyoma listened quietly. Tunde continued. The hospital quickly realized something was wrong. Your blood test results didn't match anemia. Kyoma felt her heart racing. So what did they find? Tunde's voice dropped lower. A toxin in your bloodstream. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Kyoma gripped the edge of the table. A toxin? Yes. She stared at him in disbelief. And no one thought to tell me this. Tunde's eyes softened. You were unconscious for 2 days. Kyoma felt a chill run through her body. 2 days? Kimi nodded. The doctors weren't sure you would wake up. Kyoma looked between them, struggling to absorb the information. But what does this have to do with you? She asked Kimi. Kimi swallowed hard. Because I was the one who noticed something was wrong. Kyoma frowned. What do you mean? Kimi took a deep breath. That night, I came to visit you. Kyoma tried to remember. The memory was foggy. I had brought food, Kimi continued. You remember? We were preparing for your wedding, and you were exhausted. Kyoma nodded faintly. Yes. I think so. You drank some juice while we were talking, Kimi said. Tunde added quietly, and 10 minutes later, you collapsed. Kyoma's stomach tightened again. I remember drinking juice. Kimi's voice shook slightly. And when you collapsed, I tasted it. Kyoma's eyes widened. You or what? Kimi nodded. I had studied basic toxicology during one of my pharmacy courses. The taste was wrong. The table went silent. Kyoma stared at her. You mean, someone poisoned my drink? Yes, Kimi said quietly. Kyoma's mind raced. But why would anyone do that? Neither of them answered immediately. Finally, Tunde spoke. We never found out. Kyoma leaned back again, trying to process everything. And the doctors confirmed this. Yes. But if you knew it was poison, why wasn't there a police investigation? Kimi's face filled with guilt. Because I begged them not to. Kyoma looked at her sharply. You begged them? Kimi nodded slowly. I told them it could ruin your life. How? Kyoma asked, confused. Kimi looked down at the table. Because the poison came from something inside your house. Kyoma froze. What? The juice bottle, Kimi said softly. Tunde continued. It had already been opened. Kyoma felt the pieces forming slowly in her mind. You mean someone in my house could have done it? Yes, Tunde said. Kyoma's breathing became uneven. My family. We didn't know, Tunde said quickly. And we didn't want to accuse anyone without proof. Kyoma sat silently for a long moment. So you both decided to hide this from me? Kimi nodded weakly. We thought it was the safest option. Kyoma stared at them in disbelief. You hid an attempted murder from me for 8 years. The weight of that sentence hung heavily between them. Tunde rubbed his forehead. We were trying to protect you. Kyoma laughed bitterly. Protect me? Her voice rose slightly. By lying to me for almost a decade? A couple at the nearby table briefly looked over before returning to their conversation. Kimi spoke softly. We never stopped trying to figure out who did it. Kyoma frowned. What do you mean? Tunde answered. We've been quietly investigating for years. Kyoma's heart skipped. You've been investigating without telling me? Yes. Kyoma stared at them. And tonight? She looked around the restaurant. This meeting? Kimi wiped her eyes again. Tonight we finally found something. Kyoma's heart began pounding again. What? Kimi looked at Tunde. Tunde nodded slowly. Then he turned back to Kyoma. We finally discovered who poisoned you. Kyoma felt the air leave her lungs. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Who? Tunde hesitated. The tension around the table grew heavy again. Finally, he spoke. The truth is, the person who tried to kill you is someone very close to our family. Kyoma felt a cold wave of fear move through her. Her mind immediately began running through familiar faces. Friends. Relatives. Neighbors. But when Tunde finally said the name, Kyoma's entire body went completely still. Because it was someone she never would have imagined. For several seconds, Kyoma simply stared at Tunde. Her heartbeat was so loud in her ears that it drowned out the restaurant noise around them. Someone close to our family, she repeated slowly. Tunde nodded. Kimi's eyes were still red from crying, but now she looked tense, as if the next few seconds would determine everything. Kyoma folded her hands on the table again, though they trembled slightly. Say the name, she said quietly. Tunde hesitated. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because he understood what that answer would do. Once spoken, things could never return to normal. Kimi finally whispered, she deserves to know. Tunde nodded slowly. Then he looked directly at Kyoma. The person who poisoned you was your cousin, Sade. For a moment, Kyoma didn't react. It was as if her brain refused to process the name. Sade, she repeated faintly. Tunde nodded again. Kyoma shook her head immediately. That's impossible. Her voice came out stronger this time. No. That's completely impossible. Memories of Sade flooded her mind instantly. Sade was more than a cousin. She had grown up with Kyoma like a sister. They had attended the same secondary school. Shared secrets. Shared clothes. Shared dreams. Even when Kyoma moved to Lagos after university, Sade had visited frequently. She had danced at Kyoma's wedding. She had been one of the loudest voices celebrating when Dara was born. Sade would never do something like that, Kyoma said firmly. Tunde didn't argue. He simply reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. Kimi watched silently. Tunde placed a small envelope on the table and slid it toward Kayama. "What is this?" she asked. "Evidence," Tunde said quietly. Kayama stared at the envelope for a moment before opening it. Inside were several printed documents. Medical reports. Laboratory results. And something else. A photograph. Kayama pulled out the photo first. Her breath caught. It was an image from a small convenience store security camera. The timestamp was from 8 years ago. In the photo, someone stood at the counter holding a bottle of juice. Kayama recognized the bottle instantly. It was the exact brand she used to drink often back then. Her eyes moved slowly to the person holding it. The image was slightly blurry, but the face was still recognizable. Sade. Kayama felt a wave of dizziness. "This," she whispered. Tunde spoke gently. The store owner still had the security recordings archived. "It took us years to track them down." Kayama stared at the photo. Sade was clearly visible buying the exact juice bottle that had later been found in Kayama's kitchen. "But buying juice doesn't mean she poisoned it," Kayama said weakly. Tunde nodded. "You're right." He pointed at another document. Kayama looked down. It was a laboratory analysis report. The toxin discovered in her bloodstream 8 years ago had a very rare chemical signature. Kimi spoke quietly. That same toxin was later discovered in a pharmacy inventory record. Kayama looked up. "And?" Kimi swallowed. "That pharmacy belonged to Sade's former employer." Kayama's chest tightened. The evidence was starting to form a terrifying pattern. Tunde continued. "We didn't want to believe it either." Kayama's voice trembled. "But why would she do that?" No one spoke for a moment. Finally, Kimi answered. "Because of you and Tunde." Kayama frowned. "What does that mean?" Kimi took a deep breath. "Before you and Tunde started dating, Sade had feelings for him." Kayama's eyes widened. "What?" Tunde nodded slowly. "It's true." Kayama looked at him in disbelief. "You never told me this." "Because I didn't think it mattered," Tunde replied. "Sade told me how she felt once, years ago. I politely told her I didn't feel the same way." Kayama's mind struggled to absorb this new information. "And then you started dating me?" "Yes." Kimi added softly. At first Sade seemed supportive. But later we noticed small things, jealousy, resentment. Kayama's breathing became uneven. "She never showed that to me." Tunde nodded. "She hid it well." Kayama looked down at the photo again. Sade smiling at the store cashier. Buying the juice. The same juice that later poisoned Kayama. "But why now?" Kayama asked quietly. "Why reveal this tonight?" Tunde sighed. "Because yesterday we finally confirmed everything." Kayama looked up. "How?" Kimi answered. "Sade contacted me." Kayama blinked in confusion. "She what?" Kimi nodded. "She sent me a message." Kimi reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. She opened a message thread and placed the phone on the table. Kayama looked down. The message was short, but devastating. "I know you and Tunde have been looking into the past. Stop digging. Some secrets should stay buried." Kayama felt her stomach twist. "That's not a confession," she said. "No," Kimi agreed. "But it proves she knows we're investigating." Tunde leaned forward. "And there's something else." Kayama looked at him. "Sade is coming back to Lagos tomorrow." Kayama's heart skipped. "She lives in Abuja now." "Yes," Tunde said. But she's returning for a family gathering. Kayama suddenly remembered. Her aunt had mentioned a reunion dinner. Tomorrow evening. At her uncle's house. The realization hit her slowly. You think she might try something again? Tunde shook his head. No. Kayama frowned. Then what? Tunde looked at her carefully. We think she might finally reveal the truth herself. Kayama felt completely overwhelmed. 8 years. 8 years of a secret attempted murder. 8 years of silent investigation. And the person responsible. Someone she had loved like a sister. Kayama leaned back in her chair, her mind spinning. So all these secret meetings between you two? She gestured between Tunde and Kimi. We're about investigating Sade. Yes, Tunde said quietly. And the kiss? Kayama asked. Kimi looked embarrassed. That was part of a stupid idea. Kayama raised an eyebrow. What idea? Tunde sighed. We thought if someone was watching us tonight, it would look like an affair instead of an investigation. Kayama stared at them. You're telling me you staged a fake romantic meeting to hide the investigation? Yes. Kayama shook her head slowly. That might be the worst plan I've ever heard. Kimi gave a weak smile through her tears. We realized that too, about 5 seconds after you walked in. For the first time since sitting down, Kayama felt a small, exhausted laugh escape her. The situation was so absurd it almost felt unreal. But the evidence on the table was very real. Kayama looked down again at the photo of Sade. Her cousin. Her childhood companion. The person who might have tried to kill her. Kayama slowly placed the photo back inside the envelope. Then she looked at Tunde and Kimi. So what happens now? Tunde answered calmly. Now we face the truth. Kayama took a slow breath. Tomorrow, she would see Sade again. And for the first time in 8 years, she would finally know why.